everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. And in this one I'm going to be going through my 2022 and 2023 Journal-tober spreads. This year of Journal-tober came and went, but I really love how these year spreads turned out, but I also feel like 2022 deserved its time in the spotlight, which is why this video is essentially twofold. Quick disclaimer before kind of get started with the rest of the video. As you could see, my voice is not matching my hand movements. That's because I was talking while I was flipping through these pages, and I had every intention of that being the main voiceover. However, two things. One, the mic on the Canon G7X, because I don't have an external mic, isn't the greatest, which I quickly found out. It's okay for vlogs and stuff, which is what I do, but for sit-down videos, it just didn't really sound too great. And second, I live in a city, and for some reason, this day was the loudest ambient noise day of the week. There was literal hammering at one point. So I hope that the difference between my voice and my hand movements isn't too distracting, but I felt like it would have been more distracting to hear all of this background noise. And then on top of that, for the mic quality to not be as good as my sit-down voiceovers are. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoy the video, and at the end, I will be going through my top 10 Journal-tober spreads, or at least my personal top 10. So look forward to that. Without further ado, let's get started into the Journal-tober flip through video. Alrighty, starting off with 2022's spreads. This Witch's spread is hands down one of my favorites I've ever done. I think this is the one spread where I used black paper to cover the entire page, and I love how it looks. I'm also a huge fan of this like vintage painting sticker, which I don't remember how I got, but it's there and I wish I had more. I also realized that there were quite a few double prompts between last year's list and this year's, so I'm definitely going to make it a point for 2024's prompt list to be completely different. But I feel like it's kind of difficult because spooky season, there's only so many like themes you could do, but I also feel like I wasn't, I could be a little bit more creative. This candle spread was really fun to do. I loved the photos I chose. And you could also see a throwback with the candle sticker. I used to have this sticker design in my shop. This was a part of, I think, the original Dark Academia sticker sheet. So it's kind of cool to see a little, throwback. Here is another one of those pages with the black paper background and some funky little white gel pen drips, which I'm definitely a fan of, and they do come back. They do come back this year in later spreads. This baking spread is also super cute. There is a recipe on here that we actually haven't had the chance to do yet, which is kind of embarrassing, but I feel like it kind of just ties everything together. I also talk about how I went about titling each of the pages differently between last year and this year's spreads. Last year I was definitely very bold in my decision making. I used those letter stamps to title each of the pages, but this year I was more subtle, kind of just did it in one of the top or bottom corners. So it's just interesting kind of seeing my thought process. It'll be cool to see how I decide to title the pages for next year, although I will most likely go back to the letter stamps because I just think they look really cool. combined with everything else on the page. Okay, there are a lot of spreads that I can remember sitting down and actually working on, and this ghost spread is certainly one of them. It is the cutest one I've done to date so far. I love the pictures I chose. I love the little ghosts everywhere. I'm a huge fan of this spread, okay? Because I usually don't do cute journal spreads, so that one really means a lot to me. This crystal spread is one of a handful that has doodles on them. Crystals are actually not very easy to draw, at least for me. I think I just had such a difficulty figuring out the perspective of a lot of the sides, so they look a little wonky, but it also felt weird not at least doodling a few crystals for this spread. There are also a lot of spreads that look great side by side, these two being one of them. I think it's just a mix of the color palette and how I decided to lay everything out, the mixed media elements. The prompts also really complement each other, which was definitely unintentional, but I'm kind of glad I decided to take the similar route with both of these spreads because they just look really great together. Speaking of spreads that look really great together, these two were definitely intentional. I really wanted to choose the Kraken for the creatures prompt and put it alongside the pirate prompt. They just look really amazing side by side. I love the pops of the black paper with the white gel pen on top. These two are both chef's kiss for me. Definitely some of my favorites. Alrighty, moving on to the final 2 pages for the 2022 Journal-tober flip-through part of this video. So if you are new to Journal-tober, I always do a your choice prompt somewhere on the list so you can have total freedom when it comes to choosing what you want to journal. And last year I decided to do Hades and Persephone. I am a sucker for Hades and Persephone retellings. I think their lore is super spooky and really fun to illustrate. Plus the little white gel pen pomegranate detail was a lot of fun to draw, so this page already gets points because I remember sitting down and working on it. Alrighty, moving on to this year's Journal-tober flip-through part of the video. As you can see, I actually made a promptless spread, which I didn't do last year, and I'm so glad I did because it was just way easier to kind of go back and make sure I was doing the prompts in the right order. Although I actually did end up messing up at some point, and some of the prompts are not in the right order, but that's okay because I finished it, so it doesn't really matter, you know? Alrighty, this dried flowers spread kind of has a bit of a quirky backstory, specifically with this little envelope. I had bought these with the intention of using them for our wedding invitations. However, I can't read, and I didn't realize they were going to be as small as they came. I didn't want them to go to waste, obviously. I had like 50 of them, so I decided to just repurpose and use them in my journals, which is what I did here, and I filled it with a bunch of dried flower petals, and I think it kind of just ties this whole spread together. Definitely a favorite of mine. I think it just adds another element that none of the other spreads really have. This is another spread that actually has another wedding detail. I had a bunch of these little wax seal stamp stickers left over, so I ended up using them in a few of my spreads for this year. Here are 2 other spreads that look a little bit too identical for my taste. Probably some of my least favorite. Shocking, I know, I feel like I've called every single one my favorite, but some are hits and some are misses, and those two are misses for me. Alrighty, so a huge difference between last year's Journal-tober spreads and this year's was the preparation process. I did end up pre-creating and pre-filming all of these spreads because last year I did most of it last minute and it was really stressful and kind of took away from the enjoyment of Journal-tober for me. So I wanted to make sure that this year I had plenty of time to create the spreads and enjoy the process of putting them together. And another aspect was acquiring the necessary supplies to create these spreads, which I also didn't do last year. I was really kind of using what I had, and I had wished that I had gone out and just got a few extra tidbits to make the spreads even spookier. But luckily for me, Michaels kind of knocked it out of the park with their spooky stationery for this year. Definitely not sponsored, although I wouldn't be opposed. I go to Michaels pretty much like twice a month just cuz. But they really nailed it this year with their Halloween-esque stationery. I got some really cute stamps, some holographic stickers, those two washi tapes in the left-hand corner, the skull and the bats, also from Michaels. And then these like cardboard bottle label situations, which have no sort of adhesive and would also not take any sort of adhesive, which made it very difficult to implement into my spreads, so I kind of had to come up with creative ways to paste them in. But I'm still really happy I have them, and I have so much more that I could use for next year. They also had these really cool vintage, like shifting stickers. I don't know what this effect is actually called, you know, where it looks different depending on where you're looking. Very similar to those busts on the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. But I used these stickers in several spreads, and they're just really fun to look at, so I'm happy I ended up getting them. All that is to say is that I'm happy that I took the time ahead to get a few spooky stationery bits that I could use for this year's spreads, because I feel like it made a difference and it made it a little bit easier to put the pages together. Alrighty, so for the mystery prompt, I wanted to go in a completely different direction than what I did, but I could not for the life of me remember what that direction initially was. I had printed out all the photos I wanted to use for this year's spreads ahead of time and put them in a pile, so when I was going through them, I couldn't remember which photos I wanted to use for the mystery prompt until I had finished making all of the spreads and I looked at what I had left. And I realized that I wanted to do Sherlock Holmes for this page, which obviously makes sense, but I don't know, it did not register in my brain at that point. So I just ended up using photos and little ephemera bits that kind of gave off that vibe of mystery, but kind of sad about it because I was really looking forward to doing a Sherlock Holmes page. Alrighty, moving on to the last few pages for this Journal-tober flip through. This is the Your Choice prompt, and I had so many museum ephemera pieces that I wanted to use, so I knew I had to do an art history theme for the Your Choice option, which is honestly a go-to for me at this point. I love journaling anything art history. On the flip side of that, I was not expecting to love the spells prompt page as much as I do. I think I just love how many different elements this page has. Between the crumpled up paper that has that distressed ink look, this gothic window which I had my silhouette machine cut out. If you haven't seen my November Plan With Me video, I go into a little bit more detail about these windows, but I had a bunch left over from that setup, so I decided to use one of them for this page, and I love how it looks. I think the craft paper element contrasts so beautifully against the darker tones. And I also added in one of those tricky bottle labels that is just barely being held together with that little sticker. But my journal doesn't really get tossed around that much, so I guess we'll see next year though if it's still hanging on. Alright, we've reached the final page for this year's Journal-tober, and this prompt was nostalgia. This prompt can be interpreted in so many different ways, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how everyone decides to journal this prompt. But for me, nostalgia plus spooky season really means Disney Channel original movies. I grew up watching all the Halloween Towns, Twitches, Casper, Hocus Pocus, of course. So I really wanted to dedicate a page to part of my childhood, essentially. Halloween Town is definitely one of my favorites, so this spread was a lot of fun to create and makes me really want to have a little Halloween Town marathon now. Alrighty, we have reached the end of the flip through part of this video, so now I'm going to go through all 62 pages and try to narrow it down to my top 10. If you want, feel free to pause the video, maybe gather a list of your own, whether it's like a top 3, 5, 10, whatever you want, and see if any of your tops match mine. So let's get started. Alright, rounding out the top 10 is the Overgrown page from 2023, not its sister from 2022. I didn't really touch on this spread a lot, or at all, during my initial flip through, but when I was going back and looking through the pages, I really love how delicate this spread feels. This is definitely more simplistic for me, and I don't know, there's just something about this spread that's very pleasing to look at. So it's not my favorite, it's nothing crazy, but it's definitely a top 10. Coming in at number 9 is of course the Ghost page from 2022. By far the cutest spread I've ever done. I just get so many warm feels looking at this page, so it definitely deserved to be in my top because it's just, I don't know. There's just something about it that I love, and I'm a huge fan of the ghosts and ghost face, so. Coming in at number 8 is the art history spread from 2023. Definitely a no-brainer for me for this to be in my top 10. I am a sucker for anything art history, and I love how this spread came together, and the gold drips kind of just, I don't know, they do it for me. This page also gets points because of the subject matter. I'm biased, okay? I made these spreads. It's hard to come up with the top 10 when you've made all of them. Alrighty, coming in at number 7 is the crowd favorite royalty spread from this year. For some reason, this ended up being my most popular Journal-tober spread for 2023. I'm not really sure why. I mean, it's a great spread. I really love how it turned out. I just wasn't expecting this one specifically to do so well. Maybe it's the subject matter. Maybe it's just how it's laid out or how the video came out. I don't know, but nonetheless, I mean, I really love it even more so because of how much love it got. So this spread definitely gets sentimentality points, which is why it's in my top 10. Alright, it was difficult not to count these two as tied for number 6, but I felt like I'd be cheating my system a little bit, so I decided to go with the pirate prompt from 2022 as number 6 for my favorites. Aesthetic, 10 out of 10. Subject matter, 10 out of 10. The reason why it's not higher is because I think I could have done a little bit more and pushed the envelope a bit with this spread, but for what it is, I still really love how this spread turned out, and I think the little ephemera bits throughout really kind of tied the entire spread together. Alrighty, rounding out the top 5, we have the dried flowers prompt from this year. The reason why it is this high is because it is the only page that has an actual interactive element. So I think having something like that in the spread just really brings this entire page to life and makes it so much more dynamic than really any of the other spreads. So besides the fact that it also looks really nice, the main reason why it's this high is because of that envelope filled with the dried flower petals. Flipping back an entire year, we have the Witch's Prompt from 2022 as number 4. As I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, this is one of the only spreads that has an entire black background, which I am thoroughly obsessed with. This spread also just has a bunch of individual elements that I love. The stickers, the white gel pen, the stamping, the different moon elements, everything together and separate, if that makes any sense. It just really speaks to my soul. So I was very close to making this spread the number 1, but there are a few that I like just a little bit more, like this next one. Coming in at number 3 is the Spells Prompt from this year. I don't know if it's the drip washi tape, again with the drips, I don't know. I'm a fan of the drips this year, okay? I don't know what it is about this spread. I just love it so much. And I feel like I say that for every single spread in this top 10, but I feel like it's hard to kind of pinpoint like a specific reason as to why it's so high. I don't know, the spread just brings me a lot of joy, and I feel like it has a lot to do with that window. I really love that window. Alrighty, I think number 2 is definitely going to be a surprise to most people because I did not talk about this spread at all during my initial flip through, but coming in at number 2 is Nightmare. The reason why this is so high is not necessarily because of how it looks, although I do really like how this spread turned out. The main reason is because of the subject matter. I really wanted to sit down with myself and brainstorm what would essentially be my worst nightmare, and that ended up being the end of the world, apocalyptic themes, abandoned towns, and the lack of human life. That really scares me, and that's why I felt like this spread deserved to be so high in my top 10, is because it exuded a different feeling than the rest of my journal spreads normally tend to do. I think what makes journaling so special is that it's an amazing way to illustrate feelings and emotions. So this prompt really kind of forced me to be a little bit more vulnerable than I normally would when it came to creating journal spreads. So for all of these reasons, that is why Nightmare is in my top 2 of Journal-tober favorites. Alrighty, coming in at number 1 of my favorite Journal-tober spreads that I've created thus far is the Hades and Persephone Your Choice prompt from 2022. There are a few reasons why this spread ended up being number 1, besides the obvious visual elements, right? The little details, the life and death motifs. I think the reason why I ended up choosing to do a Hades and Persephone prompt was because at the time I was in the middle of reading the Touch of Darkness series by Scarlett St. Clair, which is an amazing Hades and Persephone retelling. If you are a fan of Greek mythology or just modern retellings, I would highly recommend that series. I think the final book comes out soon-ish, so this spread definitely gets a one-up on all the others because of how specific and unique this prompt is. So it really forced me to kind of think outside the box and also accept the fact that I'm going to be posting something that's a little bit more romanticized, a little bit more personal, which I guess is the whole point of the Your Choice option, right? But nonetheless, I love how this spread turned out. I'm so glad that it kind of forced me to take that leap into sharing something that I normally wouldn't, and it overall just brings back some really great memories of me reading the Touch of Darkness series. Alrighty friends, we have now reached the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed. I would love to know what your favorite Journal-tober spreads were, whether it's your top 10, top 5, or if you had a favorite that I didn't even really talk about, let me know. I definitely sound like a broken record at this point, but I just want to give a final huge thank you to all of you that have joined, supported, liked, comment, shared, all the things for this year and last year's Journal-tober. I truly, truly appreciate it. This is one of the reasons why I love being a part of the journaling community, and it just makes me really excited for next year's Journal-tober. I know this spread was a little bit longer than normal, but I really wanted to give these spreads a chance to officially shine. However, if you want to watch how I put all of these spreads together, I created a Journal-tober playlist on my YouTube. You could also watch the videos on my TikTok and my Instagram. And then I also posted the individual photos on my threads as well. So if you want an even more in-depth look into these spreads, feel free to check those videos and photos out. I am now gonna go grab some water because I've been working on this voiceover for 2 hours and my voice is tired. And also get probably another cup of coffee because I've been up since 5. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!